Hi everyone, I thought I'd join you for a bedtime story tonight. So I just moved house, so I don't have any children's books with me, and I thought about a different way I could share this with you. And I know that some of you sent in your names to be a part of my made-up story, which will be on its way. And for now, I thought I'd share an extract of a book that I really enjoyed as a child, and one that you've probably read before. It's a bit of a classic, and thought that we could read it together. So I'm going to try something now. I'm not too sure if it works. If you've been in my class before, you'll know that IT and computers just don't get on with me. So I'm trying something new, going out of my comfort zone, and I'm going to try and share my screen with you to show you an extract of the book so that you can read along with me and you can see the pictures. Okay, so bear with me, be patient. Okay, here we go. This is an extract of Matilda by Roald Dahl. So let's enjoy this, and here we go. By the time she was 3, Matilda had taught herself to read by studying newspapers and magazines that lay around the house. At the age of 4, she could read fast and well, and she naturally began hankering after books. The only book in the whole of this enlightened household was something called Easy Cooking, belonging to her mother, and when she'd read this from cover to cover and had learned all the recipes by heart, she decided she wanted something more interesting. "Daddy," she said, "do you think you could buy me a book?" "A book?" he said. "What do you want a flaming book for?" "To read, Daddy." "What's wrong with the telly, for heaven's sake?" "We've got a lovely telly with a 12-inch screen, and now you come asking for a book? You're getting spoiled, my girl." Nearly every weekday afternoon, Matilda was left alone in the house. Her brother, 5 years older than her, went to school. Her father went to work, and her mother went out playing bingo in a town 8 miles away. Mrs. Wormwood was hooked on bingo and played it 5 afternoons a week. On an afternoon of the day when her father had refused to buy her a book, Matilda set out all by herself to walk to the public library in the village. When she arrived, she introduced herself to the librarian, Mrs. Phelps. She asked if she might sit a while and read a book. Mrs. Phelps, slightly taken aback by the arrival of such a tiny girl unaccompanied by a parent, nevertheless told her she was very welcome. "Where are the children's books, please?" Matilda asked. "They're over there on those lower shelves," Mrs. Phelps told her. "Would you like me to try and help you find the nice one with lots of pictures in it?" "No, thank you," Matilda said. "I'm sure I can manage." From then on, every afternoon, as soon as her mother had left for bingo, Matilda would toddle down to the library. The walk took only 10 minutes, and this allowed her 2 glorious hours sitting quietly by herself in a cosy corner, devouring one book after another. When she'd read every single children's book in the place, she started wandering around in search of something else. Mrs. Phelps, who'd been watching her with fascination for the past few weeks, now got up from her desk and went over to her. "Can I help you, Matilda?" she asked. "I'm wondering what to read next," Matilda said. "I finished all the children's books." "You mean you've looked at the pictures?" "Yes, but I've read the books as well." Mrs. Phelps looked down at Matilda from her great height, and Matilda looked right back up at her. "I thought some were very poor," Matilda said, "but others were lovely. I liked The Secret Garden best of all. It was full of mystery, the mystery of the room behind the closed door and the mystery of the garden behind the big wall." Mrs. Phelps was stunned. "Exactly how old are you, Matilda?" she asked. "I'm 4 years and 3 months," Matilda said. Mrs. Phelps was more stunned than ever, but she had the sense not to show it. "What sort of books would you like to read next?" she asked. Matilda said, "I would like to read a good one that grown-ups read. A famous one. I don't know any names." Mrs. Phelps looked along the shelves, taking her time. She didn't quite know what to bring out. How, she asked herself, does one choose a famous grown-up book for a 4-year-old girl? Her first thought was to pick up a young teenager's romance of the kind that's written for 15-year-old schoolgirls, but for some reason she found herself instinctively walking past that particular shelf. "Try this," she said at last. "It's very famous and very good. If it's too long for you, let me know, and I'll find something shorter and a bit easier." Great Expectations, Matilda read, by Charles Dickens. I love it. I'd love to try it. "I must be mad," Mrs. Phelps told herself, but to Matilda she said of course she may try it. Over the next few afternoons, Mrs. Phelps could hardly take her eyes from the small girl sitting for hours after hour in the big armchair at the far end of the room with the book on her lap. It was necessary to rest it on her lap because it was too heavy for her to hold up, which meant she had to sit leaning forward in order to read it. And a strange sight it was, this tiny dark-haired person sitting there with her feet nowhere near touching the floor, totally absorbed in the wonderful adventures of Pip and old Miss Havisham and her cobwebbed house, by the spell of magic that Dickens, the great storyteller, had woven with his words. The only movement from the reader was the lifting of the hand every now and then to turn over a page, and Mrs. Phelps always felt sad when the time came for her to cross the floor and say, "It's 10 to 5, Matilda." During the first week of Matilda's visits, Mrs. Phelps had said to her, "Does your mother walk you down here every day and then take you home?" "My mother goes to Aylesbury every afternoon to play bingo," Matilda had said. "She doesn't know I come here." "But that's surely not right," Mrs. Phelps said. "I think you better ask her." "I'd rather not," Matilda said. "She doesn't encourage reading books. Nor does my father." "But what do they expect you to do every afternoon in an empty house?" "Just mooch around and watch telly." "See, she doesn't really care what I do," Matilda said a little sadly. Mrs. Phelps was concerned about the child's safety and the walk through the fairly busy village high street and the crossing of the road, but she decided not to interfere. Within a week, Matilda had finished Great Expectations, which in that edition contained 411 pages. "I loved it," she said to Mrs. Phelps. "Has Mr. Dickens written any more? Any others?" "A great number," said the astounded Mrs. Phelps. "Shall I choose you another?" Over the next 6 months, under Mrs. Phelps' watchful and compassionate eye, Matilda read the following books. And they're all there. And I'm going to leave those books with you, and I'm going to finish our story there. And your challenge is either A, to find this book and to carry on reading it. Even if you've already read it, reread it again. It's always nice to get into a book again, really getting back into the storyline. Or to find some of these books on this list here and to give them a read, because they are timeless and they're certainly enjoyable. So I'm going to say goodnight for now, and I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and I hope you enjoyed my little bit different bedtime story. Bye.